In this session of the Purple Coffee podcast, I speak to Tim Grahl about the dangers of building a product purely on your passion. It does, after all, require a purpose. Intrigued? You should be. Hello and welcome to session 55 of the Purple Coffee Podcast, inspiring stories from some of the world's finest. I am your host, Turndog, and on this occasion I speak to Tim Grahl, who's a bit of a master when it comes to book marketing. He's worked with some of the world's finest authors, including Dan Plink and Hugh Howey, and a friend of mine and part of this not only show but the book, The Success Mistake, Pamela Slim. Oh yes, he has touched some great people in that sense. But once upon a time, Tim didn't really do anything with book marketing. He actually had a passion for the extreme sports, a world I don't particularly understand or appreciate a great deal myself, but he most certainly did. And he built a business around it. He built blogs and things, and it was going rather well. But not really, because he wasn't able to sustain this, he wasn't able to grow it, he wasn't able to gain any traction from it. And his entire great mistake, which of course is in aid of my book, The Success Mistake, focuses on the dangers of just building a business or a product or an idea solely around a passion. It indeed needs a purpose too. You need to serve and fulfill a need. And he's learned a great deal from this failing, which led to his future successes. It's a true game changer. I'm so happy to have this story part of the book. It plays an important role in the beginnings of one of the chapters, and well, it's just a great one. So I hope you take as much from it as I have, and I'm going to stop going on and on because you came here to listen to Tim, who's an inspiring dude. Do his stuff. But before I let you get into that, I'm going to just share a very quick bio so you know more about Tim, just in case you're going in all cold-handed and you don't know who he is, although I'm sure you do because a lot of people know who he is. Anyway, this is my little bio of him. When it comes to bumping shoulders with some of the world's finest authors, Tim Grahl is your man. As an author myself, I'm in awe of this dude. As a reader, he helps you appreciate the larger journey on offer. In other words, Tim's one damn cool cat. Although spelt differently, I like to imagine he's related to Dave Grahl of Nirvana and Foo Fighter fame. Where Dave rocked the music industry, Tim crafted a new path in the land of storytelling and writing. I mean, can you imagine a dinner table at Christmas surrounded by Dave and Tim? That'd be cool, right? I think so. And I also like to think Tim's a kind of cat who can help folk like you. He appreciates the nuances of marketing, relationships and storytelling, and continues to help writers find their readers. A worthy cause, you better believe it. And you better also believe I'm about to throw this conversation right at your face. Okay, thank you so much for joining me, and I'm delighted to be joined by Tim Grahl, who is an author in his own right. He's got a great book out which is called, How to Sell Your First 1,000 Copies. It's fantastic. I've read it myself. It gets a thumbs up from me. But he's also the main guy at Outthink, which is a company that helps writers basically sell their books and get their books out to a point where they're not invisible, which, as a writer, I can assure you, it's pretty damn difficult these days. So he does a great job indeed. He's worked with some amazing clients, including the likes of Dan Pink and Pamela Slim, who's also part of the Success Mistake, and is going to feature on this podcast shortly. And Hugh Howey, who is one of my self-published author idols, and loads of other people. So first of all, Tim, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to it.
It's an absolute pleasure. The pleasure's all mine. And we're going to be talking about Tim's great mistake and how he turned it around, and it is in aid of my book, The Success Mistake. But before we do that and get into the nitty-gritty, I'm going to pass it over to you, Tim, to just share a little bit about yourself and what it is you do at Outthink and that general intro.
Yeah, I run Outthink. I've been running it for about 8 years and full time, and we've grown it to, like you said, worked with a lot of cool authors. And our goal in everything we do is to help writers and help authors figure out how to build their platform, connect with readers, and be able to sell more books. And so we do that in lots of different ways. We work with clients. We've worked with a lot of clients. I have my book out. I have, an email list where, I have a free 30-day course that people can sign up for. And we just try to put out a lot of information to help writers. Because I've always been a big reader. I love reading, fiction, nonfiction, ever since I was a kid. And so, getting to work with authors and help them is like a dream come true, especially because I'm a marketing nerd and I can actually help them with the marketing side. So, yeah, so that's what we do, and that's what we do at Outthink.
And it's something that's so necessary these days. We're in an age where, anyone can now self publish a book, get it out there, but it just means it's such a crowded marketplace, and trying to, rule Amazon. It sounds simple enough, but it's actually really difficult. And people probably assume someone like Dan Pink, it's like, well, he's a big name, he'll just write a book. His publisher will sort it out and it'll sell hundreds of thousands of copies and job done. But these days it's just not like that. Even if you are a traditionally published author, they expect you to have this platform, be on social media, have this email list to, connect with your readers.
Yeah, and it's becoming more and more, shifting that all of the onus of actually selling the book is on the author, whether you're traditionally published or self-published. There's of course big authors. Dan Pink's now at the level where he's going to get a lot of distribution. He's going to be in the front of the bookstore, so he is. That's going to help. And then you have like the fiction authors, like the Stephen Kings and the John Grishams. The system still works for them. But if you're just coming into the game, you're basically on your own. Whether you, again, traditionally publish or self-publish, there's now millions of ISBNs being created every year. So the odds, even with being traditionally published, the odds of getting your book like decent shelf space at bookstores is low. So now it becomes, how do you sell the book? How do you build this following? And I look very kind of, I have this, most authors think very book centric. Like I have this book coming out and I want to be able to sell this book and, I got to have a big launch for this book. And I, tell writers they need to be building a platform. They need to be building that direct connection with their readers that will help them sell their current book, but everything else they do in the future as well.
Uh, Absolutely. It's just all about building a brand. So even if, if it goes beyond future books, whether it's courses or speaking or consultancy, that you've got this, platform, you've got this eager readership who is just like, yeah, I love you. I want to be involved in whatever you do.
Right, exactly.
Fantastic. Well, it's great stuff that you do. As a writer myself, I know how difficult it is, both from a non-fiction and fiction area. I have a background in marketing, but even for someone like me, it is a minefield, to say the least. So it's great, and I suggest if you are thinking of getting into writing, or you already are a writer, you've got a book in you, check out Outthink, check out Tim's stuff. That 30-day course is great. And like I say, the book is superb. I'll add all the links below the video and whatnot, so don't worry there. But this is an interview all about your great mistake and how you turned it around. I'm sure you've got a couple of juicy tales for us, so I'm just going to throw it over to you to let you, share what happened and the journey it took you on since.
Well, it's hard because I've made so many mistakes. It's hard to pick out the like ones that I should share, but I'm going to try to share a couple that will hopefully help people if they're in the middle or recovering from a mistake, kind of see it from a new light. Um, so when I first got out of college and got my first job, so this is now probably about 12 years ago. You know, my I went to school to be a programmer. Like I was trained to sit in a cubicle and churn out computer code, and I loved it. I did well in my classes. I graduated from college, and I got my first job straight out of college. And about 6 months to a year into that, I'm like, this is not what I imagined life would be like. Working. Like I thought it would be a little more enjoyable than this, and I thought it was. I had the wrong job. I was working for the wrong company. And so on the side, I started just kind of doing this thing for fun, because I was kind of bored at work, and I knew how to build websites, and this was when blogging first kind of came onto the scene. Actually, it was right around when WordPress first came out. Um, So me and my buddy really liked mountain biking, and so we didn't have any money to actually buy mountain bikes. So we were like, well, what if we started a site about mountain biking, and then we could review products on the site and get free stuff that way. So we started this site called Blue Collar Mountain Biking, and it was, just reviewing, bike parts and talking about mountain biking and that kind of thing, and it worked pretty well. And then I kept growing it. So I started like another site, and another site. We ended up with like 5 sites. I ran the thing for about 5 years, and I got a ton of traffic to the site, and I learned how to like do all the marketing around it and get people to actually pay attention to what you're doing. But I couldn't get it to make any money. It was a really hard, like I was trying to sell advertising, and advertising is a really hard way to make money in pretty much every realm, and there's all kinds of reasons for that I won't go into. And also, this whole online blogging thing was still brand new, and the cycling industry hadn't really caught up to it. So there's all these reasons it wouldn't work. And so I kept trying and kept trying, and it just wasn't working. And I ended up it was basically a failure. Like I sold off a couple of the sites for like not much money, and then just shut down the other ones, gave one away to one of the writers that was writing for me. But overall, like I don't know how much money I lost over that period of time, but it was a lot of money because I traveled and I did all this other stuff. And it was during a time in my life where I didn't have much money, and I had, young kids, and a wife that stayed home with them, so I was a sole provider. And when I shut it down, it was pretty much like this was a huge failure. Why did I spend so much time doing this? Why didn't I stop 2 or 3 years ago when I could tell that it wasn't working? um and I was just kind of embarrassed of the whole thing, because it was like, oh, I'm going to start a blog and make $1 million, like, and of course, that's really hard to do, especially in the industry I was trying to do it in. And so I kind of reached this point. I was friends with this guy that ran one of the more popular mountain biking magazines, and they were putting on an event. So I went I went to his house, and this was kind of like what I wanted to be. He ran a magazine, but I was gonna run like an online magazine, and I'm at his house, and it's like I'm looking around, and it's this like tiny little house in the middle of nowhere, and it's obvious he has like as I got to know him, I realized like he doesn't have any money, and I'm like, this is the top. Like this is where I'm trying to get. This is not what I want. And so a few months later, I like shut everything down. It was embarrassing. Like, I'd made a name for myself kind of in this world. A lot of people knew who I was, and I basically just disappeared. And what I realize now, looking back, is that set me on this path that put me where I am today. And it did that because one is I had the technical expertise. Like I can still like program. I don't do as much anymore, but I can still, like, my website's broken and my developer's not available. I just go in and fix it. Like I know how to do this stuff. Um, but having that understanding of the nuts and bolts, and also because of all of the stuff I did with the websites, I really got into the marketing side. I knew how to get people to pay attention to me. I learned what works and what doesn't. I knew how to network. I built this whole like system for like getting people to know who I was so I could get their attention. I did all of that. I learned all of that through this failed business. Well, you combine those two things together, and that's a knowledge that very few people have. Very few programmers and like coders and kind of analytical thinkers like that really get marketing and understand how it works and what works. And putting those together in one person is really where people started finding value in me. Before I did just the author stuff, I was basically doing online marketing and websites for kind of, people or businesses or, anybody that would hire us. And that's where they found the value, is because most of the time they'd have to hire a marketing consultant and then take that and take it over to their developer or designer to build it. And there was no like real connection between those, and we just took care of everything. I'm like, I'll help you figure out. I still talk about this with potential clients. I'll help you figure out what you should be doing, and then we can build it too, because that's what we do. um and that was like this that's what really let me get my start in building my name in the author space and building the company I have now. And it was because I started so early too. Like I literally built the first version of my website on a pre-beta version of WordPress. So like I was getting into blogging when it was brand new. Like nobody knew nobody even knew what it was. And because I started so early, I understood it so much faster. And so I was able to start building up my name as somebody that understands all of this new marketing stuff. So, what was this huge failure, lost a bunch of money, was a giant waste of time, was a giant, honestly, source of like tension in my marriage that I'm like traveling all the time for this business that's not making any money, caused all of this grief. And then it was this huge embarrassment to finally like call defeat and say, this isn't going to work. And I was guilty because like I had people that were working for me. They weren't, getting paid anymore because the business didn't exist and all of this stuff. And but now like looking back, I see like all of the lessons I had to learn, and I learned them on my own. I learned them like the slow and painful way, but I learned them. And now the way that I run my business, the way that I help people, all of it wouldn't have been possible if I hadn't have done that on the side, got that going while I was, doing my day job. I would have never learned marketing. I would have never learned the networking. I would have never understood all of that stuff. I would have been way behind in figuring out this whole like blogging, and turned into social media, turned into, all this stuff that started 10, 11 years ago. And so, now at the time, I don't know, like the way you're talking about this, it was like, okay, I took this failure and I knowingly turned it into this great thing. Like I turned it around. I didn't know that I was doing like, it's only like looking back now, like once I got far enough away from it that I could actually see the merits in it. But what I think is encouraging in that is that so many times people are doing things and they're just not working the way that they think it should. And nothing ever goes as fast as you think it should. Even now, I always think I'm going to have way more done by this time in the day than I actually do. Um, but this idea that like, if you fail, you know, if as long as you're learning, as long as you're trying something new, as long as you're taking that next step. And I talk a lot about this now, now that I kind of understand how this works. It's like, it's okay to be sad when you fail, but at the same time, you've now learned something. And I know that's probably a common thread, but there was this, but in the moment, like when I was shutting that down, I couldn't see where I am now, 5 years later. I had no idea that I would actually be running a successful business in 5 years. All I knew was I was failing
Mm.
and like everything. And at this point, I had quit my job and was doing this part time, doing this for the majority of my time and doing some other things on the side to make money. But like I was shutting down the business that was the sole income in my house with my two kids. And so all I had was like, I'm a failure in the moment. And so what I think is important to remember is that every person I know, especially, there's people I work with that are way more successful than I am. They've all had those moments. They've all had those moments when like, I'm a failure, this is never going to work. I've finally, finally everybody knows what I've known all along, which is I suck and this is never going to work. And those moments are real, and those moments feel like they'll never end. They feel like the end. And sometimes we forget that part when we see people um at further down the road. I was at a conference and I was watching this one lady was kind of telling her story, and she was talking about how like she's now this successful person with like the business, her business is taken off, and her husband are running the business and they just love it and they're doing great. But like 2 years before, they had like $3 in the bank and were in all kinds of debt, and they were fighting so much that like at one point the husband had to like run out and jump on the car to keep her from driving away. And like in those moments there's nothing but despair. So what I try to remember now, because like, things I try still fail. I had, and we can talk about some of those, but like I try to remember in those times when it seems really, really bad, that there's more to the story coming, and that I can control that. I can control my next decision. I can control the next things I try to do, and I can try to think ahead and plan those. But in those moments when it feels like I'm a failure, there's only despair, there's only what I've done wrong. Everybody finally sees like me exposed for the fraud that I've always been. Like, remember that there's more to the story, and everybody that you respect in business or life or whatever, they have been there in some way. Like I worked for this guy that was a well-known author, beloved by just tons of people. And when I knew him, and when I was doing some work for him, he was in rehab. Like he was at this really dark moment, but nobody knew, and everybody assumed everything was fine because, he's this well-known author and he's making all this money. And so, I think it's important to remember when you listen to people like me or, people way more successful than me, that like we've all been in those despair moments. And if you're there, and probably you have one coming, like I have one coming, I'm sure, in some way. When I'm there, I've got to remember there's more to the story. Like this isn't the end. This is just another step on the road that you're going to look back and you're going to see later. Um, what was happening. And that's what I try to do now, is when I'm in a moment when things are going bad, when things are not going as planned, whether it's small or big, I try to remember that in 6 months, I'm going to look back and understand what was going on. And that is what I try to hold on to. I was driving to the airport. I'm like 3.5 hours away from a decent airport. So I'd gotten up at 4 in the morning and I'm driving to the airport, and I'm an hour away. I'm in the middle of nowhere in North Carolina, and my car just shuts off. It's like about 5 in the morning. Never had this happen before. And I've had this car for 12 years. Got it right when I was getting married, and never had any problems with it. Just shuts off. Can't get it to start. So I call a tow truck, and when I'm waiting on the tow truck, I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, I have a decision. I can like piss and moan about the fact that I'm stuck here and I'm not going to make it to Portland. I got to be in Portland for this thing. And, what am I going to do? And I can get really like annoyed and frustrated. Or I can look for the opportunity here because I know tomorrow I'm going to understand why this happened. And so in those, I ended up like meeting this really awesome guy who like helped me out, like drove me to the airport and like helped me get on the plane on a totally different airport than I needed to go to. And then on that plane that I was not supposed to be on, I got to talk to this lady, and I was kind of giving her some advice and like really got to help her out in a way that like she wouldn't have gotten if I wasn't sitting on the plane next to her. And then I ended up getting to Portland like an hour after I was supposed to be there anyway. So it wasn't even that big of a deal. But now I understand, okay, I needed to sit next to that lady and get and tell her that. Well, if we can remember that in the middle of those really bad moments, like that was not a big deal. My car broke down. It's not a big deal. But if we can remember that in those failure moments, that at some point we're going to be able to look back and see what was happening. I think that can put us in a state of mind where we can go through them a little easier and come out of them faster, because we're not, it took me so long to get over that failed business because I felt so embarrassed and guilty. But if I had known in the moment what was really going on and what I really got out of all of that, I would have come out of it much better, much faster than I did. So that's what, I try to take away from that is those two things of like everybody has their moments of despair, and they also don't know what's going to happen next. We usually only get the end of the story, or further down the road. And then in those moments, trying to remember that down the road you're going to be able to look back and see what was actually happening. And so go through it a little easier, give yourself some grace, understand that this is part of the process, and know that down the road, you're going to have a different story to tell. And you're going to be able to tell stories of that failure that helped you get where you are now.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree with that. And in essence, that's the entire premise of a book, to change the definition of a mistake. So we get to a point where it's like, man, this is failing, or this is hard, this is a mistake. But there's going to be some lessons in here. There's something that will lead to good things. So rather than, pout and moan and, just be in utter despair now, you know, try and see that it is going to lead to something good and try and find it now rather than looking back with hindsight. And that's not an easy thing to do, and it may take a little bit of practice, but that's a fantastic mindset to have.
Yeah, and it is. It takes practice. It takes, being aware of like where you're at mentally in cases. And it's not like I do this all the time. I still,
Yeah.
have bad times. But I think the other thing I've tried to do is surround myself with people that understand that part of it, and that you won't be embarrassed when they see you fail. So many people spend their time trying to get in groups of people that they think would be good for them to be in, or they think will like help them with their status. And then it's kind of like the girl or the guy that like acts a certain way to get this guy or girl to go out with them, and then but then once they're together it's like, well, they're not dating the real
Yeah.
you, like that's gonna fall apart. And so many times I see people like killing themselves, and I used to do this. I used to do this really bad, killing themselves to be in this certain group of people because they think, oh, they'll help me be successful, and so I got to pretend like a certain level of success or a certain level of wisdom or smarts to be in this group. And then I get in that group, and now I'm terrified of any kind of failure because they're going to see me as a
Yeah.
fraud. So, um, so it's important to surround yourself. I always like in the author space, I'm like, don't try to get the A-list authors to help you. Find other authors on your same level that you can kind of link arms and all grow and learn together. Because then you can fail, but it's not that big a deal because he fails just as much as I do, and but you can help each other and learn. And that kind of like mentality of I've got to hide my faults goes away, and we can all expose our faults so we can all learn from each other. And then as you kind of ratchet up, you bring everybody up together. And finding those types of people are invaluable. It is, if you can get a mentor or somebody that's been there and like super successful to give you advice. I'm not saying don't do that, but don't like try to pretend like you don't have problems or pretend like you don't have faults or that you know things that you don't know, because it'll come to light that you don't. But that causes a lot of stress for people where they get really afraid of making mistakes. I feel like most of the stuff that comes from making a mistake, most of the bad stuff, is worrying about other people, worrying about what people will think. For me, I quit a good job, turned down an interview I'd done one interview and I'd gotten a second interview at like the best like business to work at in my town, and especially for a programmer, would put me on this track to make six figures. And but it was also like a soul sucking job, and I turned it all down and I quit my job and started my own business, and people thought I was crazy. And so when I failed, I thought I was proving
Yeah.
them all right. But that was all coming from the outside. And one, it was me projecting, but also like I was afraid and I was guilty. And the people I felt like I was letting down, now when I talk to them, like they didn't feel that way. Like, or even if they did, they realize now that the reason this fell apart was because they had something better and they would have
Yeah.
never left working for me. And so I find most of our stress from mistakes or failures comes from how we view other people viewing us. And
Yeah.
one of the ways you can get around that is to surround yourself with people that love you and care about you and know your flaws and know that you're going to make mistakes, and they just want to help you learn from them because you're doing the same thing for them. Like I have this small group of guys that are other business people, and we're all trying to learn the same thing at the same time. So I did a product launch 6 months ago that went fine, but it wasn't a big success. And I was just like, here's what everything I did wrong. Like, here's all the mistakes I made. And they like spoke into it. So when I do another one, I can actually fix all those mistakes. So,
Yeah.
remembering that, it's mostly in your head, everything that's going on. Of course, there's failures that aren't just in your head or mistakes, but trying to make sure you're being very realistic about everything and understanding what you can control and can't control.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we put far too much pressure on ourselves based on what we think other people are thinking, but ultimately we never know. Before we move on to, we'll recap sort of lessons learned because I think it's a fantastic journey you've gone down. But I just want to go back to the mistake itself, actually setting up the mountain bike blog. Like, where do you think ultimately the failure stemmed from? Was it a case of, it was your passion and you really wanted it, but you never actually saw whether there was a proper, business growth within it?
Yeah, I mean, some of this is like, honestly, well, this is what I think of it looking back, is I was learning to walk. I'd never run a business before, didn't go to school to run a business, had nobody in my life that had done this kind of entrepreneurial journey. Like, my father-in-law runs a business, but it's like this, he sells like office supplies and stuff. Like
Mm.
there's a way to do it. You
Yeah.
just do it this way. Where like all this stuff that's happened in the last 10 years, everybody that was starting out, they had no idea how to do anything with this stuff because it's brand new. And so looking back, like I'll get into the mistakes I made, but what I want to put in light is like I was learning to walk, and we don't look at a child that's learning to walk that's bumping into things and falling over and like say, oh well, you should have known you were going to fall over there, like you should have done this. It's like, well, no, you're learning to walk, and that's the thing. Jason Fried from 37 Signals, I heard him one time. This is not going to be an exact quote, but he basically said, like, learning to make money is like learning any other skill. But with learning to make money, we tend to think we should already know how to do it or something. Where it's much more like learning to play the guitar, where, I learned to play the guitar when I was a kid, and like, it's this progressive of like getting better and better and better over a long series of practice. And learning how to make money is the exact same thing. Like, I now make money easier because I know how to make money because I've been practicing for 10 years, And Jason Fried started when he was in high school, and I did not start when I was in high school. And so, that's the thing. But looking back, there's several things I did wrong. One of it is I tried to turn a passion into a business. And this is something that there's people that do it and they do it well, but you need to be careful because your passion, you're trying to put a business on top of your passion could crush your passion. I've been on a mountain bike once in the past 4 years because I don't enjoy it anymore.
Mm.
And it's because when I ride a bike, all that baggage is on the bike with me. And so I have a hard time getting on a bike and riding and just enjoying it because of all that baggage. I have other things I enjoy, so that's fine. But you have to be careful. Like, my business crushed my passion, and it was too much. It was too heavy of a weight for my passion. I started gardening like 7 years ago or something. And once I was getting into it, my wife was like, "Hey, you should start a blog about this and blah blah blah." I'm like, "No,
Yeah.
this is mine. I'm doing this because I love it. I'm not doing it for anybody else. I don't want to teach anybody else. This is mine. I'm doing this for me." And it was something I really, really enjoyed and still enjoy doing. Um, so, so that was the first thing. I tried to make a business out of my passion. Yeah, I had no real business plan except get a lot of traffic and try to sell advertising. And if somebody's listening that has that business model, most people think that there's like this line, like this straight line like this, where like as I get more traffic, my advertising revenue will grow. But what you don't understand is like 90% of the advertising spend out there is going to like the top 5 or 10% outlets, whether it's television or websites or whatever. So it's actually like this. And so you even if you like quadruple your traffic, your income will only go up by like a small percentage, very, very small percentage. So it's a really hard business. So that was a problem. I was in too early. The bicycle and the cycling industry really just runs on passion. Like the marketing guy at Company X isn't there because he's good at marketing. He's there because he used to be on a bike team with this other guy that was hiring and was like, oh, my buddy needs a job.
Yeah.
So like they weren't really kind of paying attention to what was going on. So when I could obviously show them I'm getting way more interaction on my site than you get off of this magazine, they're not going to take money from the thing they've been doing for years and give it to me. Um, so I was a little early, which, is hard to predict. It also was a big ego trip for me. So it was more about being the guy that started the company and becoming well known than it was about making money. And so when I would make decisions, I wouldn't make good financial decisions because sometimes I would make decisions about like, oh, I should go to this event because such and such person is going to be there and I want to get to know them. So I'd like spend money and time going on this trip instead of thinking, well, how is this actually going to make me money? When I talk to entrepreneurs now that are just getting started or trying to figure out what to do, I was like, figure out the shortest point between you and money and do that. Like, don't do anything else. Just do that. So stop using Twitter, stop using all this stupid stuff, stop doing, printing off new business cards and all this stuff that doesn't matter. Go from point A to point B. How do I get money? That's that's the fastest way to money. Um, so that was a failure. And so altogether, it was just a bad idea. It wasn't a strong business model. I wasn't the person to be doing it. The industry wasn't ready. It was more about my passion and my ego than anything else. And I thought, I kind of had this mentality: if I just love it enough, it'll be enough. And all of those, ultimately to various degrees, all of those killed it. You know, but again, I started when I was 21 or 22 doing this thing. I didn't know anything about, I didn't know that you had to have a business model or like a actual way to make money. I didn't think through all these things. And so again, it was just me learning how to walk.
I think there's some really key points, Vinay, especially like, the idea of passion. I was actually speaking to someone yesterday, and similar thing came up, and it was the idea of, yeah, it's really good to be able to build a business on passion, and there's plenty of people who do it. It does hold its dangers, but as well as passion, there needs to be a purpose. Whether that
Yeah.
purpose, is something more rational, or it has, bigger vision. And ultimately that comes down like there has to be an end point. It's like, yeah, there's a passion, but it's also driving me to, make X amount, connect me to X amount of people, fulfill this. If you just create a business purely on passion, then you have no idea where it's going to go, and eventually you'll probably just become downhearted about something you once loved and held very dear to your heart. So I think that's a really important point.
Yeah, and like what I do now, there's definitely passion involved. Like I love authors. I love reading. I love helping people make better decisions. I love helping people with their marketing. I love all of that stuff. I get up in the morning and I'm already, thinking about things. So it is something I love to do, but it fundamentally solves a problem, for a lot of people. And that's what I found is good is to like, okay, what am I good at? What do I love doing? And honestly, that's even a dumb question in most cases because you don't know what you're good at. You don't know what you love doing. I thought I loved being a programmer, and then I realized I'm not very good at it, and I don't really want to become good at it. And so I probably should find something else to do with my time. But I wouldn't have known that until I tried it. I mean, the biggest thing is just try something, see if it fails. Try something, see if it fails. Try something, see if it fails. You know, um, but yeah, that passion thing is very sketchy. And most of the people I know that are like, I don't know anybody that has just like taken to basically when we say that, sometimes we actually mean take a hobby and try to make money on it. There's passion, there's things you can be passionate about that are like, I'm passionate about solving this problem and I can't wait to help people solve this problem. Um, but what most people think, this is my theory, what a lot of people think when they hear, start a business on my passion. It's like I like, knitting socks. How can I make money knitting
Yeah.
socks? Or I love mountain biking. How can I make money mountain biking? Or I love this, and I find like let those be your hobbies. Like let them when money gets involved, it causes problems. And I don't want to ever choose between like my something I love doing and trying to make it make money. I'd rather just do something I love doing and then figure out a way to make money doing something else so I can continue to do this thing I love to do.
Well,
Um,
I think it's like you said, you're passionate about what you do now. It's important if you're going to start a new business to be passionate about your work and what you do. But it's like you say, there has to be a problem being solved. There has to be some kind of purpose. Otherwise, you're just going to be making no money, just losing that
yeah.
passion altogether, and it
Well,
just
it's
becomes a hardship.
it's like that old like the college business idea that everybody's done, including myself, which is like try to start a t-shirt business.
Yeah,
And like one thing I heard about that one time was like how many people are laying awake at night worrying about their current t-shirts?
yeah, exactly.
Nobody. Nobody's thinking, "Oh my gosh, I really need to get a new t-shirt with a odd saying on it." And it's like nobody's thinking that. But for me, there's people laying awake at night wondering how they're going to sell their book when it comes out.
Yeah,
Now I can help them solve that problem. And so I think it's looking for a problem that you passionately want to solve. Photographers run into this where like they buy a cool camera, they like taking pictures, so they're like, I'm going to become a professional photographer. But after they've done two or three weddings, they're like, this actually sucks, and I'm not having any fun anymore. And then what happens is they stop taking pictures
yeah,
altogether. And so, that's where it's like, solve a particular problem. And, I know I have a good friend that's a wedding photographer. He loves it. It can be a great job. But this idea, start with like, okay, what is a problem I can solve for somebody that I would love to solve in my particular skill set, things I love to do will help them solve that. That stuff I did for that mountain biking company, that failed. The mountain biking company failed. All that stuff I learned, I use that every day now.
yeah.
And
Well,
but I use it to actually solve a problem.
yeah. Well, I think it's an amazing journey, and the key thing that I take out of it is that no matter how bad it gets, no matter how big the failure, there's going to be lessons learned, and it's that idea of I see it as you've just got to be open minded to things. It's like you learn how to market because you had to do it as part of your job. Once you start doing something and running your own business, you ultimately get good at these aspects and that the fundamental things that you never were even thought about. It's like I know not how to necessarily code, but I know my way around WordPress. Well, I never really wanted to do that, but you ultimately work on your own site. You're constantly adding
Mhm.
things. After a while, you just pick it up, and if you open your mind up to those things and be like, well, I actually have all these new skills now. So if this business does fail for whatever reason, I'll be able to take all these new things, start afresh, solve a problem. Involve a bit of passion in there, and
Yeah.
I'll be able to make sure the next one's better. And something that you point on, which I've not heard before, which I absolutely love, is this idea of you eventually become better at making money, just like anything else. It's practice. Once you
Yeah.
start losing money for a while, you learn how to actually make it.
Yeah, and you see like I'm in the middle of a new startup and I don't know if it'll be successful, but it has the most potential of being a big success of anything else I've done. And the only reason I saw it as it was like the opportunity just kind of dropped in my peripheral vision, and I kind of grabbed it. And the only reason I realized that was an actually good opportunity is because for 10 years I've been learning what a good opportunity actually
Yeah,
means. In my 20s, I had every week I had a new idea that was going to make me $1 million. And I had a new idea that was going to make, that was weird. I had a new idea that was going to make me $1 million, but they were all horrible ideas and like whatever.
yeah,
Where now this is the first thing I've really like honed in on a long time, that is going to be totally different than what I've been doing for a while. And the only reason I saw it, and I've talked to some people that I was talking to another guy that knows the business I'm getting into and stuff, and I kind of pitched him on the idea, and he's like, "That's the best idea I've heard in like 10 years," and it's a good idea, and I would have missed it
Yeah.
if I didn't know, hadn't learned how to make money and hadn't learned what. And the only way to do that is to just get in, get up and start trying to walk, and you're going to fall
Yeah.
down more than you do, but you're going to get better.
Well, I use the analogy of learning to walk as well. I've got a young son, he's just about to turn 18 months. And it's like you say, you don't
Okay.
look at children at making mistakes. They fall over. Well, yeah, that's what you have to do to learn to walk. You don't go to your kid, God, you're an idiot for, falling over it. It's like you learn to crawl and then eventually learn how to walk and you learn how to talk. And you have to make a heck of a lot of, well, you get bruises. He comes to my house every week with bruises because he's fallen into things. He's learning how to do it all.
Well, and the thing with that to remember though is nobody does that with children, but they do it with
Yeah.
adults. We have an entire industry built on very profitable industry built on trying wanting to see movie stars and other popular people fall down. And we love it and we
Mm.
want more of it. And that's what gets harder as an adult is there are people I know that want me to fail to prove themselves right.
Yeah.
There are people in my life that they didn't take the risk to start their own business, and so now they're in a shitty job they hate. Not that every job's a shitty job, but like, now they don't have the life they wanted, and they kind of want me to fail to prove like, oh well, I shouldn't have
Yeah.
done that. And that would make them feel good to watch me fail. So there is like, we use that baby analogy, and I did too, but nobody says to a baby, "Oh, you're an idiot." But when you're an adult and you
Yeah.
fail, there are people that say or think you're an idiot. You should have
Yeah.
never done that. And that's the part that's hard is that everybody has somebody, even, Hugh McLeod talks about this of like anytime a good idea happens and change starts to happen, people in your life are going to resist it because they want everything to stay the same. And so, there is that mentality of like when you fail as an adult, there are probably going to be people that yeah, well, I knew that all along,
Yeah.
and that's just part of it. But
And it comes back
yeah,
to what you were saying earlier. You need to surround yourself with people who aren't going to treat you like that because they're in a similar kind of situation.
yeah,
And unfortunately, when you get into business, you're going to probably, drift apart from certain people because you're just on totally different paths.
yeah,
And whether they want to or not, they want secretly you to fail, so it makes them feel better about who we are.
right,
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, I think it's been an amazing thing, and I can just imagine everyone who's watching and listening to this will be like going, "Oh my God, yes, 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 I understand. I see this." So, if you could just give a little bit of advice to, I'm thinking about the person who's just starting out. Whether they're young or old. They're a new entrepreneur. They're doing their first thing, and it's absolutely easy to say, you're going to make mistakes, but you just have to put a smile on your face and try and think about this is going to be good. You're going to look back in a week or a month or a year and go, wow, this led to something. But it's not easy to do that when bad stuff's happening and when you've got no money at that time. So, what couple of things would you say to that person to help get them through the mistake and to focus on there is going to be a light at the end of the tunnel?
the the first thing I would do if the one thing I did absolutely right 5 years ago was get a business coach. I read a ton of books. I listen to podcasts. I'm constantly trying to learn, and that's super helpful. Absolutely do that. But that does not replace somebody speaking into your specific problem and helping you make good decisions with it. So most entrepreneurs, when they're getting started, if they can find a mentor or hire a business coach. I was paying a business coach a lot of money every month when I didn't have the money to spend, and it paid off huge. And so hire a business coach, get a mentor, get somebody that's been down the road that you're trying to walk that will help you navigate this. You should be learning on your own, but to have somebody that like once a week or once a month is going to sit down with you and like you're going to say, here's the problems I'm having, and they're going to give you specific advice. Some of my business
Yeah.
coaches was advice was like, go read chapter 8 of this book and do what it says. Like, but I would have never found that without somebody that's saying, here, this will solve
Yeah.
your problem.
But it aligns
And
perfectly with what you're saying because they have actually learned how to make money. They've
mhm,
made those mistakes, so it makes sense it aligns with what you said. It's like, well, you know, you aren't there yet. You've got to earn that experience. So, you know, to help you along until you get to that point, speak to someone who's already made those
Yeah.
mistakes.
And anytime, and people like that will help you avoid mistakes. You'll still
Yeah.
make other mistakes, but I would rather learn from somebody else's mistake than like have to make them all myself.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's what you're doing when you get somebody that's been down the road. And again, if you can't find a mentor, find a business coach, pay somebody, whatever it takes. Find somebody that can give you specific advice to your specific problems in an ongoing way. Um, and that will solve so many problems early on. If I had done that 10 years ago, it wouldn't have taken me 5 years of
Yeah.
failure. You know, I would have still failed it. Like that business was doomed, but like I would have probably shut it down faster or learned something or figured out a different way,
Yeah.
um, you know, and so that's the thing. I recommend everybody that's getting started, still trying to have trouble. I still have people in my life that have been down the road and speak into it. So highly recommend that.
I love it. Yeah. No, and I agree. And one of the best things I've done, I've not got a business coach, but I've had several mentors, and
Hmm.
they're huge. And it's what I kind of say to people. I'm like, you know, get a mentor, get several. You know, get people who have been there and done it, because it does make a huge difference, massive.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Tim. It's been a great journey. What an amazing chunk of advice. You know, I'm taking a lot of it in. I think it's fantastic. And it does just go to show that we're all raw, no matter when you started. Even if you've had 40 years in business working for the people, it's just a different world as soon as you get into your own business. And you are
Hmm.
going to make those mistakes. So if you involve yourself around positive folk who get you, and with people who have been there and done it, you'll be able to get through. And it is just trying to keep that mindset of, look, this might be bad right now, but I am going to look back on it and have learned things. And and one of the things I always trying to do is look back at all the things which I know now, which I didn't a year ago. You know, all these little
Yeah.
things like, well, I know more about, you know, using this kind of software, or, you know, doing this online, which, you know, I didn't purposely want to learn that, but you pick it up. And if you add all those bits and pieces together over time, it's like, wow, you know, I've learned quite a lot over the last few years,
Yeah.
just as much as I
Yeah.
did at university. So
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
fantastic. Well, it's been a pleasure, and I'm sure everyone watching and listening has taken a lot down. So thank you so much for joining me and being part of this.
All right. Thanks. No, I enjoyed it.
Cool. Cheers.
And there you go, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for being part of today's session and joining me this afternoon. A big thanks to Tim too for being part of the book Success Mistake and this very podcast. And true pleasure indeed. I'm sure you've taken a lot from Tim's words. It's one thing to start a business on passion. It's a worthy thing. I think most people should do it. You want to love what you do after all. But if it's only about your passion, it's not fulfilling a purpose, then how far down the road can it go? You need to be helping people. You need to be serving a true need. And I think this is what Tim learned, and hopefully you learn from his mistakes too. So you can learn more about Tim. I encourage you to follow him and such. And as well as all the show notes can be found at tdog.co/purple coffee 55. That's tdog.co/purple coffee 55. It's been a true pleasure. I hope you will join us, and whilst there, consider subscribing, rating, and reviewing this podcast. But until then, until next time, have a great one. I love you. Turn Dog. Peace and out.